Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Prog Connection. Today, we are going to be doing a little bit of a smaller video. It's a little bit more rant focused. We're going to be letting Dad take over for this episode. It's going to be more focused on the subject of prog metal and if it should be considered a prog rock subgenre. Dad, why don't we let you kind of give an explanation, a short explanation before we get into the counterpoints?
Sure. We had a video, we did a video, I guess it was I don't know, a month or two back, in which we went into the idea of whether the prog subgenres are really very constructive. Are they really doing anything for the audience? Do they help at all, or are they a hindrance? And I maintain that they're a hindrance because they categorize bands into segments that even the band themselves may not agree with, and thus limiting the audience. I suppose there's somewhat of a help in terms of if no one's ever heard anything from you before, then perhaps if you're categorized in a subgenre that people already are familiar with and like, then they may give you a bit of a chance. They may listen to it and say, well, that's kind of like what I kind of like. So I'll give this band a chance and I'll buy the CD and see if I like it. But for the most part, I think that it really limits audiences and pigeonholes bands into certain subgenres that really don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to one band in a subgenre, and they sound nothing like any other band.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me at least, prog metal may be the worst of all the subgenres in terms of that it over categorizes bands as being sounding alike, even when you listen, they don't really sound that much alike. But for the most part, most of the prog metal bands that we have listened to are not any subgenre of prog, they're a subgenre of metal. They sound like metal bands that they want to be more complex. Maybe they got bored with whatever they were doing. And so they sat down and they put on some prog album. Maybe they put on a Yes album, or maybe they put on an Emerson Lake and Palmer album, and they said, "Wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe we could do some of this within the parameters of what we're already playing." And then for the most part, most of the bands do a very lousy job of it. So they sound terrible. Like the stuff that we listen to today, Zoe, like we listened to some Tool.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible. I mean, it wasn't even just because it wasn't prog. It's not prog at all. It's not even good music. It's just bad. I would categorize it as noise. I don't know if some of it is in odd times and maybe a little bit difficult to play. I don't know. But of course, there's no keyboards in any of this stuff. So except for in Dream Theater, there's Jordan Rudess, who I respect he's technically a very good player, but again, to me, he's obviously a technically good player. He seems to like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He seems to have good taste. He can probably write some really good stuff. And there he is, stuck inside of this horrible metal band, doing terrible music that has not inspired at all. They're not progressing anywhere. They're just trying to do technically complicated. I guess they're trying to copy Queensryche somewhat, but they're not writing good songs. They're just only copying the idea of doing technically complicated stuff and trying to intimidate people into saying they must be good because, well, they can play a lot of fast licks and they can play some fast notes and some odd times. A lot of prog bands playing a lot of odd times and play complicated stuff. Some of it's good and some of it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's the thing is that, again, the bottom line is that prog metal is just not prog.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really need a subgenre called prog metal. Maybe maybe there's a room for a somewhat of a subgenre called heavy prog, for
Mm-hmm.
which maybe, Rush is maybe the poster child. Because, I consider Rush to be one of the fundamental cornerstones of prog. and they're a heavy band that's more guitar oriented for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, but obviously in the 80s they were a bit more keyboard oriented,
Yeah.
which I think was a good thing myself personally,
Mm-hmm.
even though I think most people who play keyboards would, acknowledge that Geddy Lee's not exactly uh a virtuoso keyboard player, but he did an adequate job and they fit the songs. And I'm sure he wrote some of those musical bits around his own keyboard playing, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
Just in the same way that Eddie Van Halen wrote Jump on keyboards, right?
Yeah.
Right? It was written by a guitar player on a keyboard, and he wrote that part, and that's the basis of the song. It's still a heavy rock song, but it happens to have a lot of keyboards because it was written around a keyboard part. And I suspect that things like subdivisions are written in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Getty sat down and did this lick on a keyboard, and that became the basis for a song. He didn't just throw the keyboards on top of a guitar riff,
Yeah.
even though lots of the earlier Rush was very
Guitar
guitar
oriented. Yeah.
riff oriented.
Yeah.
And of course, Zoe, you and I, we love Rush, and
Mm-hmm.
Rush are one of the iconic bands, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if what you think. I don't think that they're really prog metal. They're more like heavy prog with guitar-oriented prog. And I don't know what we would call some of these other bands like Dream Theater, that because they're not really like Rush at all. Because Rush was really good at writing great songs, and these guys aren't. They're good at They're sort of just writing complicated riffs and trying to fit a song somewhere in there. And then, of course, a lot of the bands like the stuff you showed me today, like Tool and stuff, the vocals are just absolutely horrible. People just can't sing. I don't know where they get these singers from. Just sounds like trash to me. Noise.
So the first counter argument is that bands like Dream Theater are taking the fundamentals of prog and adding metal on top, which I'm assuming they are talking about moving away from the pop structures, adding mood changes, introducing other genres into their music and complex instrumental passages, orchestration such as real orchestra or mellotrons, organs, complex lyrical concepts as well.
Oh, I get that they're absolutely from the concept idea and the lyrical idea, they're very much borrowing from a prog oriented idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Maybe they should just call it, I don't know, conceptual metal or something like that, but just,
Mm.
you know, put it on metal archives or whatever, some metal website, and say we're a sort of a prog influenced metal band. It's disingenuous to any prog rock fan who has grown up listening to Yes and Genesis, and that you put this stuff on, and it's the stuff that you heard when you were younger, and you said, boy, this is crap, right? Like, borrowing from like Metallica or something. As you know, Zoltan, I mean, I wouldn't listen to Metallica for 10 seconds. I think it's noise. I don't think anybody in the band can play at all. They can't write a song to save their life. It's a lot of nonsense noise, and it has nothing to do with prog in any way, shape, or form. I don't know. I mean, again, there's a debate about what exactly is prog. Are you progressing somewhere? I mean, I
Mm.
personally view as being a prog musician for whatever it is now. I don't even know anymore. 20 something years. It's that
Well
prog,
over 20 years now, Dad. Probably 40.
yeah, prog is a style.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an art rock style that has certain elements and certain characteristics. And one of those is that the music should be emotional and convey moods. It's not primarily about how fast you can play. Yes, this is an element in really good prog songs is that
Mm-hmm.
there is musicianship, which which overlaps with the jazz fusion category.
Yes.
that, and a lot of musicians, like even you know, early 70s Genesis, it's obvious that Phil Collins was a very big fan of jazz fusion, thus his interest in and involvement in the band Brand X.
Yeah.
And he wanted to bring some of that element into Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very successful in bringing that in on songs like Cinema Show,
Mm-hmm.
and continued that on all the way through albums like Duke, even, where there's still a jazz fusion element. And Tony Banks was able to incorporate that into his more, I would say, classical based approach to chord structure.
Mm-hmm.
That it was borrowed mostly from a love of classical music and
Mm-hmm.
romantic era, Franz Liszt and
Yep.
Chopin and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
chord structure, and then bring that in, and then just, he knew that, we need to do a solo over this. So we'd write a solo rather than improvising some wild solo like, I don't know, like Jan Hammer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, everybody loves those solos, and I do too. Tony Banks is my number one inspiration as a keyboard player, so
Right.
I love that. And I realized that it does have a little bit of a jazz fusion background, but essentially, Genesis being the sort of prototypical prog band, it's really about writing songs. And I mean, I don't have any sort of video evidence, but my guess is that if you pinned if you pinned him down, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford and stuff, they would say, "Hey, we're always been a pop band, and our prog comes from overblown pop songs, right? Kind of like what the Beatles were doing with Sgt. Pepper's and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, right? That you just blow up a pop song, you make it more artistic. You explore every avenue you can. You bring in you bring in jazz fusion elements, you bring in folk elements, whatever you can
Yeah.
to enhance the sonic majesty of what you're trying to convey as the emotion of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that also involves bringing in heavy rock elements. I mean, Genesis did that in the early days, even with the knife, right? They brought in those heavy rock elements,
Yeah.
a little bit of King Crimson and some heavier rock elements, and that's okay. But when you're start off, I think, with some of the bands, the Tool and stuff, it sounds like they didn't start, the guys in the band did not start off by listening to Selling England by the Pound and then say, let's do music like that, kind of like that, but let's bring in some heavier elements. I feel like they started out as being more metal oriented and then threw the prog element in later.
Mm-hmm.
Again, me myself, I just don't listen to any of that stuff, and I don't care. I don't care about it. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I don't think that there's I don't think that people that it's like some of it's literally noise, but some of it's I in my younger days I have listened to Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, and I did like that album. I would consider it I would not consider it to be a prog album in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
It's a prog influenced heavy rock album, or maybe even a bit of a metal album, like a
Okay.
sort of in the I don't know, Iron Maiden kind of metal with a
Right.
little bit of prog elements thrown in, but it's really not prog in any way, shape, or form. But it's still actually very good. Yeah, I mean the mood of the albums that you showed me today, like Tool and stuff, there it's all just anger, like
Yes.
very aggressive, angry music.
Now, you see, the counter argument for something like that is if that doesn't appeal to you, then maybe that's just not the kind of mood that you want to be hearing. That's another counter argument that someone would be putting there.
I suppose, but there's a lot of anger on, the Lamb Lies Down, back in New York City and stuff. But it still sounds like prog. It doesn't sound like metal kind of death metal kind of growling and these things, these that, and again, Julie, again, I know it's down to taste.
Mm-hmm.
All music is down to taste, right?
Yes.
Someone
Yep.
can tell you Beethoven is amazing, but if you put on Beethoven album and you can't stand it, all the lecturing that this is amazing music and you're supposed to like it won't make you like it.
Right. Exactly.
So I mean,
I don't think we're
I
trying
don't,
to
I just,
debate whether you think you like prog metal. This is not the subject.
yeah,
The subject is whether you think it should be defined with albums like Selling England by the Pound.
yeah, I just don't see that there's anything in common. Not do you like it now? You know, you're 45 or 50 years old. Will you listen to Selling England by the Pound now? But was that your inspiration? Is that why you got into music?
Mm-hmm.
Or was, you know, or did you take classical piano lessons and you fell in love with Mozart? Is that why you got into rock music, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that these people, I, you know, again, I don't want to say, I should say, I apologize, Ellie. I don't want to say these people because they're, you know, I'm sure that some of these fellows are very nice human beings, and I probably would could get along with them because we have a common love of music.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what was their inspiration? And I think that they're, I mean, I don't know because, you know, I've been, you know, I can remember back, I was 14 or 15 years old at one time in my life.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess when I was 14 or 15 would have been 1979, 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that you can tell me that, you know, Metallica or Iron Maiden or what's this other guy, the Lemmy and
Yeah.
Motorhead
Yeah.
were releasing albums back then, and I knew they existed, and I heard a little bit of it, but nothing I heard ever made me want to go out and buy any of these albums.
That's fair.
And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I when I listened to them, I said, "Wow, that's really crap. I don't want to hear that."
Yeah. But
Or a
that's
Kiss
taste.
album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't like it. So yeah, it's about mood, right? Mood
Yeah.
is also about taste.
All right. So the next counter argument would be it's bands like Rush that put heavy music in prog music. Fates, Warning, Dream Theater, and the like just took that formula and added more prog and metal to it.
I think that that becomes an argument of that they have an audience,
Mm-hmm.
which I do not begrudge. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
people have an audience and there's somebody who wants to listen to it,
Yeah.
that's fine. I am not the gatekeeper, right? I'm not the gatekeeper for what the definition of anything is or
Mm-hmm.
what people like. If they like it, that's fine. They can go there. When when I see a website like Prog Archives, which I imagine is run by people who think that progressive rock music is an important genre
Mm-hmm.
that should have a place where people can go who like this kind of music and feel at home on the website.
Yes.
It's very disheartening to see sort of the promotion of bands like Dream Theater and Tool, right? It's just like, geez, this I've been in this genre for whatever we said before, whatever it is, since I was, you know, 15 years old. And Benjamin's Kite, our band has been around since the early 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're playing this style of music. And, you know, that it's again, it's not, to me, it's not helpful to confuse bands that are essentially metal bands with bands that are trying to do um prog rock music.
Mm-hmm. So I think that we can touch on a few of these albums. Like we did listen to I'll bring up a few of them just to get them over with because we did listen to Images and Words. by Dream Theater and Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater.
And again, Julia, I think there was some good keyboard playing, which
Mm-hmm.
as a keyboard player, that's what I noticed, whether there's,
Yeah.
but essentially seemed to me like a lot of it was like Iron Maiden with a keyboard player and trying to make it complicated.
Right.
And
Mm. You
songwriting was fairly poor, and singing was really, really, really bad.
right.
Uh, what is the f- the guy who's on these out singing on these albums?
James Labrie.
Yeah, he's so I don't know the guy name in Queensryche, but he's sort of a copy of that guy.
Mm.
I don't know what the guy's name is, but I'm sure it's very familiar to the audience, right? That
Yeah.
they know who this singer is. I don't know the guy's name. Very sort of operatic style,
Mm.
sort of in the same category as sort of Bruce Dickinson, I guess, right? Which
Um.
which is fine, but for that style, Michael Sadler does it way better, right? He's just way better at singing that sort of operatic sort
Rob
of
Marotti too.
yeah, just very much better. And the guy's just to me personally, taste, I didn't find his singing to be inspiring, or
Mm.
he's sort of like a bland, middle of the road metal singer, right?
Mm-hmm.
With that operatic style, right?
Right.
Which I don't hate, but at the same time, I couldn't care. Doesn't grab me. So
Mm-hmm. We also took a listen to albums like Second Life Syndrome by Riverside, which was also pretty highly rated on Prog Archives as well.
yeah, and there was bits of this that I liked. I believe Zoe, right?
Yes.
But a totally different singing style. I think the guy's singing in a lot lower register,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there was something organically that I did like about some of it, but I'm not sure that any of it to me sounded like prog. It's not prog.
Mm-hmm.
It may be sort of artsy.
Moody.
Uh, I don't know what do you want to call it. I don't know, just kind of artsy, grungy stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
some of it was okay. But
Yeah.
again, the debate is really is it prog? Nah, not really. No.
Um, we also took a listen to Death as well as what was it? Gorguts.
Yeah, I think both of those were pretty much unlistenable, right?
Yeah, you didn't like any of the
Yeah, death metal
stereotypical
stuff.
black metal death metal tropes, which were the blast beats, the death vocal, the screaming, etc.
Yeah, that is basically becomes
The
there's a
Gorguts was honestly kind of shocking to even me, and I'm relatively tolerant, but yeesh, nothing about that even reminded me of any kind of prog I've ever listened to.
no, there was nothing prog about it, and I don't think anything good about it either.
Hmm.
You know what I
Um,
mean? It's just a lot of noise. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure about who the people are in this band. Maybe they're really nice people, and maybe on a personal level, I can get along with these people very
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
My guess is that I probably can,
Hmm.
because again, if you're got a mutual love of whatever kind of music it is that you do, and you're
Yeah.
passionate about it, and I'm
You
sure
can
they're
respect
very
that, of
nice,
course.
very nice fellows and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. But I would say that what they're doing is noise.
Hmm.
It doesn't
Um,
doesn't even pass the threshold into bad music. You
right.
know, there's bad music. I would consider, punk, the punk rock of the late 70s is bad music, right?
Hmm.
Or some of the grunge of the 90s is bad music. It may be somewhat musical in that people are sort of playing the right notes and sort of playing in tune for the three chords that they're playing, but it's just not good music. It's just bad.
Hmm.
But I think these bands didn't cross the threshold into being just bad music.
Hmm.
They were just noise.
Mm.
Like they were intentionally making noise. They like that because that's the mood they like. It's about a mood.
Hmm.
They like that aggressive kind of, you know, sort of angry, angry sound. They
Hmm.
like it,
Hmm.
I don't think it will. It doesn't sound like Close to the Edge to me.
Right. That's fair. Um, the last thing we'll touch up on is a few bands that you actually do like from this genre. We can obviously put in Haken there, and by some degree you can put in some Porcupine Tree, and by some degree I guess you could throw Rush in there as well. So what would you say about those?
Well, I've been a Rush fan since I was, 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Rush started out as more of a guitar-oriented band, and when I was 14, I wasn't really playing keyboard, so I didn't really notice. I just, I mean, there's really good songs and really good
Yep.
concept pieces and all of the lyrical content and all of the,
Yep.
I mean, I love them and I still really love Rush. They're a fantastic prog band, and the stuff that they did where they had more keyboards in the 80s, I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably it was Getty that was pushing them in that direction because I have no idea why, but it made a lot of sense to that every sort of progressive rock band had those sounds, those that you could pull up synth sounds and stuff, and he decided that he was going to take that on and make sure that Rush had those sound palettes
Yeah.
available.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a good move on his part.
Yeah.
And it worked very effectively up until perhaps the album counterparts, where they went back to being more guitar oriented, and I think probably they kind of went a little bit downhill there as they were, starting to try and be just more of a heavy rock band than a prog band.
Mm.
I think that's, for a guy who grew up as Rush as being one of the sort of fundamental prog bands,
Yeah.
was certainly a bit of a disappointment in the later 90s when they started being more of a heavy rock band than a prog band.
Mm-hmm.
That's too bad. But in terms of Porcupine Tree, there's so many albums of theirs that are so fantastic, and I would consider them to be very prog. I absolutely love In Absentia.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that's a fantastic album, and yes, could say it's on the heavier side of prog, but I don't, I don't, I don't fault it. I don't view it as a metal album wanting to try and be prog.
Mm-hmm.
I view it as a guy who's incorporated some of his tastes for heavier rock into his desire to do progressive rock. But but of course, we know from interviews that he was also incorporating a lot of influences from Crosby, Stills and Nash and
Mm-hmm.
America, those kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
which I think really adds to the musical weight of the albums. That's really, again, not to make it that he's doing a soft rock album because he's not, but those elements are very integral to making the quality of those albums really amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that. I think the next couple albums were getting a little bit more oriented towards trying to incorporate more sort of metal elements. I think with Fear of a Blank Planet, it sort of got to being as far as I would go to say before it started to wander off, at least for my taste.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the incident a lot. But then I think the incident is almost back in line with In Absentia, like it's the same kind of thing. I mean, yeah, those are good albums. And again, I'm not a big fan of Fear of a Blank Planet, but
Mm-hmm.
what was the one before that?
Deadwing.
Deadwing. I do like Deadwing. There's some really good songs on that one,
Mm-hmm.
and I do like the style of it. And yeah, the if there's a heaviness to it, I don't really notice because I think there's good songs, and you just kind of it just all blends as to one good sound.
Yeah.
So I give those albums a big thumbs up.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I don't really notice if there's I think there is some reasonably decent keyboard playing,
Mm-hmm.
at least in terms of sound
Yeah.
quality that it adds to the album.
Mm-hmm.
even if it's only just for sound effect or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Steve Wilson is playing some of the keyboard sounds, keyboard parts himself. I don't know. Probably piano parts he's playing himself.
Yeah.
You told me, Zoe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And probably he's playing some of the Mellotron parts, and so he's sitting there and going, "Yeah, this part would sound really good if I put a Mellotron on it, and then it sounds great, right?"
Yeah.
Which is really a prog way of doing things, especially the Steve Wilson albums like "Hand Cannot Erase" and "The Raven," that was produced by Alan Parsons. Very much keeping in league with, within what the nature of what would be a sort of an objective measure of what progressive rock is. In other words, obviously Steve Wilson and I pretty much agree what is progressive rock and what is not. And when he set out to do the Raven, he understood that the elements that you need to have to make it sound like a progressive rock album, and he included them, and he did a fantastic job, and it's a fantastic album. And yeah, Haken is a little bit different because they don't include all of the elements. They have this, they do sound like a little bit like someone who is very interested in being very starting out a little bit metal and then incorporating progressive rock elements, but incorporating them in such a fantastic way that you almost can overlook the idea that, hey, maybe they started out as being more interested in metal
Mm-hmm.
than prog rock, but they really
Mm-hmm.
did such a good job. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan. I would say that I like it a lot. And that's a band that I'm perfectly happy to welcome into the sort of prog rock community,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that, with what I heard, it's really good and has great qualities of the essence of what progressive rock ought to be.
Yeah.
And yes, they come from a little bit more of a metal viewpoint, but still, I think that they crossed that threshold of being between being mostly a metal band and being a prog rock band. I'm gonna send out love to Haken because everything you've showed me has been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a big thumbs up, I like it.
Mm-hmm. And
Approve.
I th-
I don't know what they view themselves as.
mm-hmm.
Maybe they view themselves as just a heavy prog band. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like or I really like those guys, and I like that direction.
Mm-hmm. That's
And so I don't have one would say I don't have really a total hatred for all things that are heavier on the prog side. It's
yeah.
just if it's too much borrowing from Metallica
Mm-hmm.
and Iron Maiden, then I think that it's mostly metal and
Well,
probably should not be on Prog Archives
just to
or other prog websites as being considered some subgenre of prog.
all right. So I think that'll wrap it up. Thank you very much for that. That was fun. We got a worst to best coming. We'll be doing that. We got a little bit of reviewing to do on a few of the worst to best ideas, and we got an album review coming soon. John was not in this episode. That's fair. I'll cut that out.
He's on vacation, right?
Yes.
Well, I hope he's enjoying his vacation.
Yes. Me too. Anyway, thank you everyone very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.
Cheers.